webinar series. My name is Lauren and I'm from ironSource's marketing team. Thank you so much for joining us today. Noa Eckstein, the product manager of our Playworks studio, will be teaching you how to hack creative optimization. In the first part of the webinar, Noa will be covering the principles behind creative optimization and show you how she and her team analyzes creative performance. The second half of the webinar, the floor will be open for any questions you may have. Before we get started, I wanted to take a few seconds to tell you a bit more about ironSource and our Playworks studio. ironSource is developing the industry's leading growth engine for games, reaching 2.7 billion engaged players a month. The solutions we provide to our partners effectively close the monetization and marketing loop and empower game developers to accelerate their growth. Our ad mediation platform is #1 in the market for game devs. Playworks is our in-house creative studio where a team of animators, designers, developers, project managers, QA, performance managers, product managers, and analysts build interactive ads based on actionable in-ad data. The Playworks team builds over 110 creatives a month, and that number is only growing. Want to learn more? Head to www.ironSRC.com. We will be sending you a copy of Noa's deck as well as a link to the recording of the webinar once the webinar is complete. And if you're interested in checking out our past webinars, please head to www.ironSRC.com/webinars. We'll be holding our next webinar on August 27th, where we'll be going through monetization A/B testing and answering all the questions you may have. Noa, take it away.
Thank you, Lauren. Hi, guys. Okay, so you developed a really good game. You even have an amazing creative. What is next? What I'm going to discuss with you today is creative optimization. I will share some basic principles you can incorporate in your day-to-day and will present you with how we are leveraging in data to make even better creatives. After that, as Lauren mentioned, you're welcome to ask me anything about creative optimization and I will answer gladly. Please feel free to send us the questions through the presentation and we will get to them in the end. Let's go over some of the basic stuff you already know about creative optimization and I will use in this presentation. So you know the basic APIs, you know CTR, CVR, IPM, eCPM, retention, and ROAS. You know the context of the user, when your ad is meeting the user. RV, interstitial, what is he playing a game? Then you know the difference between A/B testing and creative optimization. In A/B testing, we usually have only one winner. In creative optimization, we have a winner per context. I will go around to the word context a lot in this presentation, so be with me. Then you know creative types. You know there are playable ads, you know there are videos, you know there are interactive videos, end cards, and etc. You know the theoretical part of creative optimization. You know that creative can make or break your game business. You know the advantages of a good creative, and you know that a good game does not necessarily translate to a good creative. I played a lot of really good games that had not so good creatives, and all they needed was the right creatives that we produced for them in order for them to scale their UA. So because this is my first webinar, I needed something to break the ice. So I brought something big with me. I brought you the icebreaker. So the icebreaker are 10 principles you need to remember for your creative optimization. I will go over in this presentation. Inspiration, choose a goal, existing assets, benchmarks, routine, error potential, ad fatigue, key details, emphasize innovation, and run cross-testing. Inspiration. So I must tell you, I have at any given point about 10 games on my phone that I use only to watch ads. Play your competitors' games, see the ads everyone are doing, inspire for them, and be better. Not only look at them at tools like App Annie or Sensor Tower. Actually, see it from a user point of view. You need to understand the user context. I will go over it over and over in this presentation. Choose a goal. So I know you want everything. We want it as well, but you need to choose one KPI so you can choose your best creative according to it. It can be IPM, it can be output, it can be retention, it can be brand awareness. If you choose IPM, for example, so you just want high IPMs to scale, but you're choosing one of the quality KPIs, so you want to keep your game as close as possible to your actual gameplay, to not get users confused. Here's an example of 4 creatives that are running for the same title. So you can see that one has a really high IPM, but the other has a really high output. Which one will you choose? You need to answer that before start testing. After starting testing, every time go back to your main KPI. Measure everything, but always go back and see how it affected your main KPI. This will help you not to be confused with all the data out there. Existing assets. So you need to know what you're currently running, what works best, what works not as good. You need to ask yourself, who is the current winner? Why is it winning? Will the new creative outperform it? And which creatives do I need? So always go back and see how your creatives are doing to see if you have videos, if you have playable ads. Pause the ones that are less performing and add new ones that will perform even better. Don't forget that. Benchmark. So always go back to your benchmark like you go back to your KPI. If you don't know your benchmark, you don't know your potential, where you are and where you need to be. In every analysis I am doing, I'm always comparing my creative to the benchmark, per genre, per network, per ad unit, per geo. Don't forget the context. Here's an example of our current benchmark in US iOS. So you can see that there's a big difference between the different genres out there. So you need to pick the most relevant category for your game, and you need to see where you stand. Are you in the maximum, are you in the minimum, are you somewhere in the middle? Always go back to your benchmark as well. Before soft launch, for example, if you know your benchmark IPM, you can assume you will meet around the average one, so you can estimate what your bid should be in order for you to scale. Routine. So this is something that is really important. You need to run your creatives, analyze them, conclude your results, do new variation, lesson learn. I will again say it, I can't emphasize it enough. Run, analyze, conclude, new variation, lesson learn. You need to keep a regular routine of that. You need to always challenge your current creative. You need to test. You need to have as detailed data as possible. And don't forget to take the user experience in consideration when analyzing. When the user see your X button, where does he meet your creative? Is it RV that he will gain virtual coin for it? Or is it interstitial that pops out between stages, for example? Take it into consideration when analyzing. And if you have a really good creative that you see has a motif that goes through time, do template out of it. It will help you increase your production rate. Error potential. So this is something that is really close to my heart. I must tell you, the random results hazard. You need your stats to be significant. Don't pause your creatives too soon. Don't be hasty. Wait until you gathered enough data to be able to compare your creatives. You can see here like an example of a creative that ran for like 2 weeks, and every day there was a different IPM because every day we had less than 2,000 impressions. So we see 11 IPM, we see 19 IPM. If you look at overall the time period, so you see the real IPM is 15. So this is why you need to run it. I always suggest to do it at least 7 days, so you'll be able to compare work days to work days and weekdays to weekdays. Remember to compare apples to apples, not comparing Android to iOS, for example. It's really important to have statistically significant results. Ad fatigue. So ad fatigue can occur when users see the same ads over and over again, and therefore become less responsive to it. You can fight this with innovation and with constant iterations. A regular routine will assist you with that, as we saw before. Remember that today, since there are so many games that are very similar to one another, there are a lot of creatives that also resemble. So ad fatigue can happen even if your creative is new, but it's something that other users saw before. So you need to take that into consideration and you need to track your creative. My thumb rule is to iterate at least every 8 weeks, at least do some small modifications, even if you don't have the capacity to do something major. And of course, innovate, don't forget that. Key details. So small modifications can make a huge difference. Test everything and take nothing for granted. You can even do small tests. You can do localized and non-localized, short and long, easy and difficult, different pointers maybe. Here's an example of a playable ad that we ran for a long time and didn't really scale. You can see that in the graph, the red bars. And then all we did was took the playable and did a full screen end card in the end. So it helped us boost the IPM by 30.5%. And look what it did to the installs of the app. So that was a huge success story that we did with minimal effort, and it's something that everyone can do as well. Emphasize innovation. So be first. This will also help you fight ad fatigue. 3 years ago, playable ads was something that was available like only on web and not on mobile. You don't have to do only gameplay. You can think about different things to try. Our latest innovation, for example, was a slider template interactive end card. What we usually intended was to do like before and after scenarios, but then we saw it was useful for other cases as well. I must tell you from a personal point of view that when I saw the end card on the left, I thought it would fail. I even told the channel owner that was responsible for it that we shouldn't even run it. Maybe it's like, I don't think users will understand what they need to do here. And I was wrong, even after seeing thousands of ads and doing hundreds of analysis. So it goes beyond to show you that trust the data and don't be hasty and test everything, okay? Don't think that because you tested so many ads before, you know what you should do now. So you still need to keep testing. Run cross-testing. So this is something that is very important for scale. So you can do tests that will be relevant for all of your creatives at once. For example, call to action, the button color, the pointer, autoplay. For example, we did a call to action analysis. So we tested in 20 titles, 3 different call to actions. So think about it. It's the same creative. All we changed was the call to action, the text on the button in the end. And you can see that continue playing had like 60% win rate versus install now that had 20%. So this is something we could have done because we incorporated in most of our ads after that and basically boost the IPM for all of our creatives at once. Okay, so always try to do cross-testing as well. So now I want to go back for a second and explain again about my icebreaker. So we had inspiration, we have choose goal, we have existing assets, benchmark, routine, error potential, ad fatigue, key details, emphasize innovation, and run cross-testing. If you have any questions about that, feel free to add them now. Now I want to show you a bit of more in-depth analysis. So I need you to stay with me because now it's the part that it gets a bit more complicated. So the interest of interactive ads basically created the whole new world of analysis open for us. Now we can understand the user journey inside the ad and not just track the impression and the click. Collecting the analysis became something that is part of our day-to-day routine. And we have a new set of KPIs that we can now measure and track, compare our creatives, and do even better ones. I will show you, for example, how we do a process of analyzing one of our creatives and basically producing the recommendation for future improvements. So we always start with basically the main KPIs. We start with something basic so we will be able to know what we want to drill down to because we have so many data, we need to decide what we want to test and what we want to analyze. So we're going over the main KPIs, then we're doing a full funnel behavior to understand what the user's journey inside the ad. Remember I discussed context? I hope you do. And because of that, you know that we're always trying to see things from a user point of view. And the inner data helps us understand what user thought, what made him install, and what made him not install the app. Time analysis, also something really important to understand. How much time it took a user, how much time it took a user to engage, how much time it took him to complete the ad. The correlation between the time and the user behavior. So this is something that combines both the second phase and the third phase, and basically helps us to create a fuller picture of what happens to a user inside the ad. And then we use all of the data to do next steps. So I will walk you through the process now, like with one example. So I will go over a hyper-casual title. I can't show it to you, I'm sorry, but I will discuss about the flow. So think of, there's the user, okay? He can either win or lose. If he wins, the ad is over. If he loses, so he can either try again or click to go to the store. After the second attempt, he can either win or lose, okay? But he can't try again. I hope you understood the funnel. It's a pretty simple one. So this is a real life example, okay? We have two variations that we did for this app. So we have one that is more difficult with 1,000 meter goal, and the second one that is more easy with 500 meter goal. So what I started with, as I told you, my main KPI. So I have engagement rate, which is what is the percentage of users that actually chose to interact with my ad. I have completion rate, which is the percentage of users who completed that, who reached the end, who didn't exit it before receiving the end card. I have how many users click to go to store, and I have my IPM. And now I can see that the most difficult, more difficult variation won in both RV and interstitial, which is very interesting. And I can see that comparing to my hyper casual in-ad benchmark, remember we talked benchmark? So now we see it again. Compared to that, my ad is really good. So I have higher IPM, I have good engagement rate. It may be improved a bit in RV, but it looks good. So now I want to understand why. Why users liked better the first variation. This is my full funnel analysis. I have, you can see the blue one, okay, which is the difficult variation. And you can see the other one that is easier variation. The number in brackets show to you the percentage of users from the start, okay? For example, if you see the lose game after the user engagement, you see it in the box. So 91% of the engaged users lost their first try, and 75% of the users who started the game lost, okay? I hope everyone understood that. So let's go over one flow, okay? You see the flow in bold, so you see the thicker line. So that's the most converting flow I have. So I know that most users converted after losing once, trying again, losing again, and then they wanted to install the game. So this is really correlates to what we already know about hyper-casual titles. Users like a good challenge, okay? You need to give it to them. Don't make it too easy. You can see that users who won were had less probability to install. So you want it to be difficult. So this is something we know from here. We also know that it was a very difficult game. This is why we see it was very successful, more from our benchmark, what we saw before. So we can see that only like 2% of our users and 99% of our users won their first attempt. This is also something we see here. So after analyzing that, what we want to do is to go and do a time analysis to understand more about the user behavior. So we can see here, you see the timeline from 0 seconds to 37 seconds. We see that users are engaging within 2 seconds. This is where we want to be. Since we know that in interstitial, for example, the X button appears after about 5 seconds. So it's a very good place to be to have a TTE that is 2 seconds. Then we know that the first time a user loses, it's between 11 and 12 seconds, depending on the variation. And if he wins, it takes him much longer. We even see that for losing the first time and winning the second time, so the average user took 37 seconds, which means that in RV, it happened after the X button appeared. He continued playing after he had the ability to leave the ad without losing his virtual currency that he wanted to win here. So this is not a place we want to be. We want it to be, everything should be before the 30 seconds. This is something you should remember. We can also see something very interesting here, that after losing the first time, users took less time to win on the second attempt, which means they actually learned from the first attempt. Now we want to combine both of them together. I hope you like a good graph, because I do. So we have here a graph that shows how TTE basically affects installs. So we can see here, which I took the difficult level to not do overly excessive graphs here. I tried to keep it simple. So we have here, you can see the blue bars that shows you how many sessions per TTE. Remember, TTE is the time to engage. It's the amount of time it took an average user to interact with my ad. So we can see that most users engage with the game within the first 2 seconds, what we saw in the previous slide. But we also see something very interesting here. After the first 3 seconds, the probability for installation decreases over time. So you can also see it in the right graph. So you can see that the drastically drop in probability for install after the first 2 seconds. Here we know that we have a really good tutorial, okay? We did a really good job here. So the TTE with the highest probability to install equals our average TTE. So we know we are in a very good place. And then we have another very interesting graph that we have how TTE affected installs. So you can see here how the probability, you can see in the right graph, how the probability basically decreased over time, okay? But we see a very good, nice sweet spot between the 18 seconds and the 22 seconds, where most installs came from them. We can see in the left graph how many sessions we had per TTC, basically the time to complete the ad. Remember that we always look at data that is statistically significant. We always need at least 10K sessions, 30K is preferable. We also see that 13.6% of the users completed the game after the X button already appeared. So this is something we want to avoid. We don't want users to need to continue playing after basically having the option to leave. We want them to see the end card before, so we want to shorten the ad in this case. And then we see there's a major drop in installs after the 30 seconds. You see it in the right graph. So it correlates to what I already told you that we know about users. So now, after basically going over all of the user behavior in this ad, I'm prepared to basically offer the next steps. So what we want to do here is to test a version with 1K goal and faster gameplay. So we want to keep the goal that we currently have with the best variation, but do a faster gameplay to have a shorter TTC, to improve my completion rate, to improve the number of users that actually finish my ad. Then I want to do testing of the same version with 5.5K goal. So because of my I know 1,000 meter goal is better than 500. Now I need to check 1,500. Testing a version without the option to retry after the first lose. What if I want to show my users a very good challenge and I want them to intrigue them to want to install my app? So I can try to do a version without a retry. And then they will have the end card after the first lose, and then they will be able to decide if they want to install the app or not. So this is something that also can improve my IPM, and it's also something I want to test. Another interesting thing that we can test here is that since we saw before that after 3 seconds, the probability that the user will of not engaging, the probability of user to install basically drops drastically. So I can add an autoplay here that will play the playable like a video after 4 seconds of no interaction. I can either do an autoplay that the video is playing. I can either basically jump to another tutorial. Maybe that would be something that would be more interesting to these users. But I want to show them some other option instead of just looking at the first tutorial and not engaging with it. What we are currently working on and what our baby now is Playworks Kit Nucleo. So what we are doing is we're working on a library that will, our partners will be able to implement in their ads and will enable us to gather in data for playable ads that were not developed by us. Some of our partners already implemented the beta version and received in-ad analysis and our recommendation accordingly. It's something that is very important to us because we really think that you should have, our partners should have access to in-ad data like you have CTR and CVR and IPM. It will really help improve the playable ads and interactive videos and interactive end cards that we already have. Okay, so we have some really interesting questions here. So we have, do videos or playables work better? So as I said a couple of times, and thank you for for giving me the ability to say it again, context. So it depends. We sometimes see playable ads that are working better, and we sometimes see videos that are working better. I always recommend testing both, okay? So we know that in interstitial, you have to have a video, okay, anyway. But we know that in RV, playable sometimes work better, and it really depends on the game and how good your video and the playable are. So I always suggest do both. You can even do a video followed by a playable, so we call it the playable end card. Try it as well. Analyze your results and follow accordingly. Okay, so how can I get access to my metrics from ironSource? So if you're referring to CTR, CVR, IPM, you can see it in our platform. If you're referring to inner data of playable that either was produced by us or by you, so you need to contact your AM because currently we can only supply this data manually. But feel free to contact your AM and we'll be happy to share this information. One of my videos has been outperforming everything else for 6 months. Should I keep it as it is or make changes? So always keep your winner. Even if it's been 6 months, don't pause your winning creative, but add to it. Even do small changes. You can add a call to action during the video, maybe improve it even more. You can add a different end card at the end, basically to keep it fresh for your users, but don't pause it. How often should I look at my numbers and make iterations? So I suggest, basically me and my team start every day with looking at the numbers because we want to make sure nothing basically dropped or something spiked, or we want to understand like where we stand every day. But if you don't have that capability, look at it every 7 days, and then only then you can pause other creatives. Okay, interesting question. Should I change one thing at a time, or can I change 3 different things at once? I don't have that much time. So true A/B testing is always changing one thing every time. Because if you're changing more than one thing every time, so you don't know what affected the drop or the spike, and then you won't know how to incorporate it in your future creatives. But if you don't have a lot of time and you have a lot of creative to test, so you can test 3 at once, just remember what you tested, and after that, go back and try to find the one thing that made the difference. If you find the one thing that made the difference, you will be able to incorporate it more easily in your other creatives. What can I do to increase my engagement rate? So to increase your engagement rate, you need to give the user the feeling that it's actually a playable ad. We have a lot of videos today that mimic playable ads, and therefore users tend to be more suspicious when they see something that is similar to playable ads. So you need to use, for example, dark overlay, use a pointer, write that it's a playable ad. It's something that you need to test a few ideas to see how to tell a user this is actually a game and not a video that is pretending to be a game. Is it important to guarantee that people win in playables? When should we let player win and when should we let player lose? So as we saw from the example I showed in this presentation, so in hyper casual, users like a good challenge. They like to lose. They like to see that it's something that doesn't come easy. They need to work hard to win here. So in hyper casual titles, I always recommend to do it as difficult as possible. But other genres behave differently. For match 3, for example, I also prefer, and from what I see, to give the user the satisfaction that they won. So they can lose in the beginning, but you need to give them the amazing end card at the end, tell them they did a good job. If we're referring to slots, so you can combine lose and win, for example, to make it more reliable, but also give them the feeling that they won, like that it's really good for non-hyper casual users. Hi, thank you for your presentation. I have a question. How to create an effective video ads on your site? We're running both playable ads and videos, but the performance of videos is so poor. Is there anything have to know this? So yes, so videos, since there are so many, it's more difficult, but it really depends on your genre. So we see that if you tried a gameplay video and it didn't work, try something else. If you have a meta game, use that. If you have characters that users will like, try that. So you need to be very creative. You need to have something that is simple to make users understand like what your game is about, but you can be creative, do cinematic stuff, but always try running gameplay video in parallel, because if gameplay video works for you, it means that you receive the really high quality users. What is the best way to test new creative without hurting the campaign's performance? So that's a good question. You need to be alert. You need to stay on top of your numbers. We discussed before, like the regular routine. You can't avoid that. If you're testing creatives that perform less, that has less IPM than your current creatives, your general IPM can drop for a while. It will probably increase after that, after data science learned that the new creative is not performing as well. But you should just be alert, keep an eye for the numbers, try to see if you see drops, so try to understand where it comes from. You can't avoid that, but if you want to innovate, if you want to try new things, so you won't be able to succeed. Okay, so don't be afraid from that. I have a question. We have a new title. How much impression ironSource network needs for stabilization ECPM for one instant in one country? So to have, if you're referring to how many impressions you need to have significant results for creative, so we are talking about bare minimum of 10K, but preferably 30K. So the system will understand like what is the IPM, what is the ECPM, and be able to compare it to other campaigns that are already running. Can you do cheaper creative testing in countries outside the US, like for example, the UK, and then take winning creatives and apply them to US market? Yes, you can. It's not bulletproof. We sometimes see creatives that are working better in UK while others working better in US, but you can definitely test your creatives first. It's also a way, like from the other question before, it's also a way to avoid a new creative to crash your campaign. So you can test it in geos that are English speaking, like Australia, Canada, or UK, and then implement it in US. But you need to do it fast. You don't want to be late to market. If you're doing something innovative, so you want to be first. So you can definitely do that. Just do it fast. I love the example of the continue playing CTA making a big CTR increase. What are some other favorite examples of small changes that made a big difference? Okay, so some other things we tested were that we tested, like I said, the dark overlay that really helped improve the engagement rate, which we tested localization, okay, which is something that is not that difficult to do, but can really boost IPM, especially in countries like China, for example, but also in Germany and in Russia, for if you want to speak about Europe as well. And it's something that that is really easy to do. I'm trying to think about other things. So we tested buttons of colors of buttons. So I can tell you that in China, for example, the red button worked, but in US, so it was the green and the blue. Okay, I hope that's enough examples. I'll try to think about some. Do you produce creatives for specific placements? If so, are they tested only in placement they were produced for? So we actually did a test where we had a special config, for example, for interstitial, and we ran it in parallel. So we saw really good results because in interstitial, for example, so the gameplay should be much shorter because users are an ad that popped up for them. They didn't really plan to see it at that point, and they can exit really fast after 5 to 7 seconds. So we did something different from that. We did also, and what we saw was that it worked very well, but it's not that mandatory because sometimes we can see the same playable ads working, same variations that work best for RV and for interstitial. So we are trying to put it in our minds, but we still test everything everywhere because like I told you before, you have to test everything. It's not something that you need to say, okay, so something worked for me once, I will just take it for granted. Always test both. Cool. So thank you guys. I hope you will join us for the next webinar at August 27.